Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be involved in the third GM Moving conference and I've been invited to put together a short video to help us with our mental and emotional well-being during these really difficult, unprecedented times. Some of you may have watched another video that Eve and I produced several weeks ago now, called Weathering the Storm, very much about how could we support ourselves in those early days to handle the increased anxiety that I think lots of us were feeling. So it felt fitting to do an update on that. So today's session is called Still Weathering the Storm, because I think what's becoming quite clear is that working in the times of COVID-19 is very much about a marathon and not a sprint. So we need to be looking after ourselves constantly during all of this. Now, some of you may be aware that I was involved in GM Moving's conference last year, and we were, hopefully, some video here, we were at the Etihad, somewhere that I have great delight in going to, although not just at the moment, obviously. And my session that I was running was based actually in the Legends Stadium, or the Legends Suite, I think it's known as. Of course, here are some of the legends. So it's a bit different this year because unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because we're all learning in different ways, I'm afraid I'm in the Legends Lounge. So this is me based in my lounge at home, mini studio currently, with my legends, all my children and grandchildren displayed on the cupboard behind me. And I've been quite interested looking at all of the videos online of very famous people at the moment. They've all got really important academic texts on their bookcases, and you can glance down at mine and it's mainly full of children's books for when my kids and mainly when my grandchildren are here. And there's another legend who's also with me that some of you will have heard of. Here he is, Stanley. So slightly different from last year, but I'm sure everybody wants to make the conference a great success, and having to do things differently is a great learning opportunity for all of us. Now, I suppose what I want to focus on is how people are feeling at the moment, given we've now been in this kind of unusual setting, an unusual way of working now for about 8-9 weeks or so. And whether people are working from home, whether people are furloughed, whether people are in isolation, and lots of us are still working at the front end of our organisations, whether that's in health or in local authorities or in the third sector, clearly. So how are we all feeling? Well, there isn't going to be one shared kind of approach. Everybody's going to be feeling differently at different times. But I think talking to lots of colleagues and lots of friends, there are some commonalities that are around. So without a shadow of a doubt, for lots of people, I think there was increased anxiety, more fear around, fear for themselves, fear for their families, lots of uncertainty. We don't really know how things are going to pan out, how long things are going to be as different as they are currently. And certainly, I do think whether it's people who are working from home or are still going into offices or buildings, there's a lot of pressure around for us, having to learn new skills, new approaches, doing different job roles, having to work very differently. And for some people, that pressure will be turning into very unhelpful feelings of stress. Not for everybody all of the time, but for lots of us, I think there are heightened emotions. We're up and down. There's also, I think lots of people are going the extra mile constantly at the moment. We're worrying about things more. So whilst we're working very hard, we're also getting probably a lot of us poor sleep, not healthy in the long term, and certainly to be at our best in terms of performance, not useful either. Some people talk to me about unexpected feelings of guilt. So those people who perhaps are supporting colleagues but are not on the front line, and I hate that expression actually, the sharp end of our services, that actually they feel they should be doing more or could be doing more, but for all sorts of restrictions that are on us, that's quite difficult. And lots of people are feeling guilty. And those of you who are trying to homeschool at the same time as well, perhaps feeling we're shortchanging our children and not giving them the best experience that we would want to. And for lots of us, this whole feeling of powerlessness, how we can't actually influence a lot of what's going on nationally, so a feeling that we are having to work with what's given. And that's quite tricky for those of us who want to take more responsibility and want to really influence. And then for lots of us, and I suspect for lots of you who are attending the conference, there's actually quite a lot of feelings around what I call professional grief, which is more academically regarded as what's called moral distress. That actually most of us want to do the best job we possibly can all of the time. Um, for our citizens, for our patients, for our communities, for the people we're working with and alongside. But actually, because of the way things are currently, sometimes we're having to compromise on the way things that we think actually ought to be done, or that we feel are professional values. We're having to compromise on some of those because of the situation that we find ourselves in. Now, whilst I think life is tricky for everyone at the moment, there is a suggestion, and research is showing that for those of us who work within what I'm going to call the broader, wider public health, education, third sector sectors, so those of us who are working with our communities, a lot of us are what are called intrinsically motivated. Research by Nesta, the Public Sector Innovation Unit, confirms some of this, that actually most of us who are working, doing the work that we're doing, trying to improve the life chances, lifestyles of our communities to enhance their well-being, most of us are doing that not just for the pay and pension, so which is probably just as well, really. Most of us are doing the work that we're choosing to do because of our values, because of our attitudes, because of our beliefs, because of things that we think are important for our communities and our society. And what that actually means is we tend to do more than is in our contracts. We tend to do more than is within our job descriptions. We tend to want to go the extra mile. We tend to do more than is actually expected of us because of our internal value system. Now, that's fabulous because it means we get lots done and we contribute a great deal, but it also means that we can burn ourselves out and that we can have greater levels of exhaustion. So lots of you are likely to still be thinking about and worrying about work when you've actually finished for the day, when you've finished with all your Zoom conversations, and when you're trying to relax, then work issues will still keep appearing for you. So we are at more risk of burnout, more risk of stress, because we tend to go that extra mile. What the research also shows, therefore, is that we also tend to have greater levels of compassion for other people and lower levels of self-compassion and self-care. So we're much more likely to put more effort and more attention and pay more attention to the people that we're working with and for our families and for our colleagues, rather than focusing on ourselves. Now, clearly, that's always an issue, but it's even more of an issue just at the moment, because we're trying to do the best job we possibly can within the restrictions that we have, and COVID-19 is making it increasingly difficult for us to fulfil our values, attitudes and beliefs, making it more difficult. And if we're not careful, we're not going to look after ourselves well enough to be able to continue to do the great work that I'm sure all of you are doing currently. So there's something about how do we learn, how do we develop ourselves to take time and to pay more attention to our own care during these difficult times. It's rather like when we're on an aircraft, which not many of us have been on recently and unlikely to be in the foreseeable future. But when we are on an aircraft and we're listening to the safety briefing, what's actually said to us is if turbulence occurs, if things get tricky and difficult, then the oxygen masks above our seats will appear and oxygen will flow, and you're always invited or instructed to put your own mask on before you help other people. And really, self-compassion is very much in that territory. If we want to continue to be able to do the great work that we're doing to enhance the well-being in our communities, then actually we need to look after ourselves as well. And some might say look after ourselves first so that we can continue to do the great work that we're doing. So intrinsic motivation is quite an important concept. Now, some of you will have seen this kind of image before, this Japanese concept of ikigai, very useful. And it may be that for lots of us who are attending the conference, we are actually playing out our ikigai, our reason for being. So lots of you are likely to be doing the work that you do because it's something that you feel passionate about. You feel passionate about exercise, about movement, about well-being in our communities. you're also very good at it. So you're using your strengths, your abilities, your talents to do the work that you do. And you're fulfilling something that the world actually needs. So clearly the issue of well-being and movement and enhancing activity in our communities is really important. So the world actually needs us. And most of us in the room are also getting paid for doing those things. So we're achieving our ikigai. If you haven't seen this concept before, I'd encourage you to have a look at it. Just Google it. Loads of information out there. Because most of us attending the conference are in a very privileged position. We're doing something that we feel passionate about, using our strengths, talents and abilities to address a real need in the world, and we're getting paid for it at the same time. So whilst it's a privilege, it also means that we're likely not to look after ourselves so well because we're so engaged with helping our communities. So we need to develop more self-compassion. Now, there's masses of information out there about self-compassion, and some of you will have heard of Kristin Neff. She really is the academic who's done so much work in this territory. She's done lots of podcasts, several TED Talks, etc., etc. So if you are interested after today, have a look at the work of Kristin Neff around self-compassion. Clearly, I've only got a few minutes, so I'm going to try to crystallise what self-compassion is about in a very short space of time. And fundamentally, it's about treating ourselves the same way as we would treat a good friend who was going through a particularly difficult period of their lives, who was struggling, who was feeling weak, who was not feeling that they were being of their best. And what most of us would do if one of our colleagues or friends told us that they were struggling or finding life difficult, we'd be really kind and empathetic towards them. We'd support them, and we'd help them in any way that we could to try to help themselves. Now, all self-compassion means is responding to ourselves in that same way, really. So what are the three core elements of self-compassion? When we know we're not feeling good, when we know we're feeling low, when we feel we're struggling with things that are going on in our lives, maybe both at work and at home, we need to respond with self-compassion. And it has three core elements. The first one is we need to be kind to ourselves. Quite often, some of us, when we aren't doing so well or we feel we're struggling, we actually start to be quite harsh with ourselves. We'll try to give ourselves a good talking to, and we'll tell ourselves to stop being weak. We certainly don't say the kind of things that we would say to a good colleague or a good friend. We tend to say things to ourselves we wouldn't say to other people. So how do we respond to ourselves with that same kind of kindness that we would do to good friends? The second part of self-compassion is recognising that everybody feels unworthy sometimes. Everybody feels like they're not coping very well. Everybody can feel low. Everybody can feel weak. Everybody can struggle. So this isn't just about us, it's about common humanity and responding to ourselves in a way, recognising we're not unusual, and that actually recognising that we would say to other people, it's okay not to be okay. That's really important, that this isn't about us not measuring up, it's about everybody and the common humanity that we give to each other. And the third and perhaps most important part of self-compassion is accepting that we are feeling not at our best, that we do feel we're struggling or not measuring up. And instead of beating ourselves up about that, asking a very clear question, what do I need right now? What is it that I need to do that will enable me to feel better? In the same way as we would ask a colleague, how can I help? What can I do? What do you need at the moment? So how do we ask ourselves that? And in a nutshell, that's what self-compassion is all about. In the same way as we would be likely to embrace a small child to help them feel secure and safe, it's about treating ourselves in that same way. So I'd encourage you to look at the work of Kristin Neff. In the meantime, some kind of tips that I think might help, some kind of quick tips that I think might help in these circumstances. I think the first one is re-engaging with our purpose, remembering why you do what you do. If it feels tough and hard where you are at the moment, try to remember why you've chosen to do what you do. Your work is important, and trying to remember that can sort of help us feel better in difficult circumstances. Second thing, without a shadow of a doubt, and it wouldn't be appropriate not to say this at a GM moving conference, get more exercise. It really does help, releasing lots of really good neurotransmitters that not only increases our feelings of worth and our feelings of well-being, but actually does produce lots of those really important neurotransmitters that can help us with our well-being generally. Go outside, and the weather's been quite kind to us recently, and I know we're not allowed out very much, but get outside. If you can do your exercise outside, even more. Lots of research showing simple things like doing a bit of gardening, spending some time amongst nature where you can, really, really helpful for us. Some of you might laugh at this one, but some of you will have heard me say it before. Stroke something. When we stroke anything, dogs, cats, guinea pigs, rabbits, whatever does it for you, even people, but you need their permission, please. When you stroke something, your brain produces lots of oxytocin. And oxytocin is really helpful for calming our anxiety. So very important. Partly why I often mention Stan, Stanley, my dog, in these presentations, because when I'm feeling a bit low and under the weather, getting the dog to come alongside me and I can sit and stroke him, know that's really helping with the production of oxytocin. Again, I've said it several times before, journaling or jotting down good things, keeping a gratitude diary. Even in these difficult times, there are lots of simple good things in our lives that tend to pass us by. So keeping a little notebook beside your bed just before you go to sleep, jot down all the good things that you've experienced during the day, hearing the birds sing, enjoying a nice cappuccino, having a great Zoom conversation with colleagues, etc. Good, simple little things that we can notice and spot. I'd encourage you to look for silver linings. It's not all doom and gloom at the moment. If you take the time, there are some really good things that are happening as a result of our lockdown and not being out and about so much. All the ecological things that are improving, air quality, getting better, traffic down, and being able to hear the birds. All of those sorts of things. Take a few moments to think about the silver linings around us at the moment. If you find yourself feeling particularly anxious, then I would suggest you take a moment to reset, just a few moments aside, a few deep breaths, 2 or 3 deep breaths, really just to reinvigorate yourself, getting some deep air into your lungs. Humming one of your favourite tunes, conjuring up the sight of a loved one, keeping a stability zone on your phone, something that's really important to you, a picture of a loved one, a pet, a place you've once been. Just taking a few moments away from that anxiety and resetting yourself, very, very important. Something some of you might already do, but maintaining or making up your own mantra, having a self-affirmation statement that you might say to yourself several times a day. My work's really important. What I do is helping others. I'm really making a difference in my community. It doesn't matter what the short statement is, but think about a mantra that you can repeat to yourself several times a day. It can be really helpful. This is something that sounds very simple. Know what unwinds you. We're all different. We're all individuals. So some of you will feel more relaxation when you do really vigorous exercise, when you go for a 5K run or something like that. Others of us have more sedentary occupations that unwind us. So doing a jigsaw or knitting or literally just curling up with a good book. Knowing what unwinds you and not trying to do things that you know work for other people, remembering what does it for you. And I suppose the second point, really important, it's one thing knowing what unwinds you, but do you actually do it? Are you building it into your life? Very important. Know what unwinds you and do it. Again, I'd ask you to notice everybody else's kindness at the moment. There's so much of it going on around us, with our neighbours, with our colleagues, small acts of kindness that are going on around us. Just really important to stop and notice some of that. Very important for the perfectionists amongst you who are striving constantly to do everything to the best of your ability. I think more now than ever before is a time to recognise that sometimes good enough is okay. I'm seeing lots of tweets about the challenges of homeschooling, trying to be not only the best parent, the best mum and dads, the best doing our jobs, but also now being best teachers as well. It's almost impossible to do those things and to do them all to the best of our abilities. So accepting sometimes good enough is okay, and allowing ourselves to just do that sometimes. Now, loads and loads of helpful resources out there. Whilst I hope these tips have been helpful, if you are minded to, lots of other places you can get lots more information. I'd really encourage you to have a look at Action for Happiness if you haven't already done so. They do really helpful calendars every month. And May's calendar is all about meaningful May. So those of us who do the work that we do because it's about our meaning and our purpose, a really helpful calendar with small activities every day that you could have a go at to help you enhance your well-being. And again, another website I'd really advise people to have a look at is the Greater Good Berkeley website. It's about the Greater Good Science Centre and producing masses of free resources at the moment and to enhance our well-being, both for ourselves and our communities. So I'd certainly encourage you to have a look at those. So I hope you've had or have a great conference. Things go really well. I certainly enjoyed my time last year, and I'm sure it'll be just as good this year. So thanks for asking me. If anybody wants to contact me, here are my details. But have a great day and enjoy yourselves. Take care. Stay safe.